This question arose when somebody was complaining about Dennis Prager. It was basically this, that Jews are not loyal to their host country and are more loyal to Israel. But what about Muslims? Or even anyone of any race that is not the race of the dominant race of the nation in question? We all have divided loyalties. Even as children, sometimes we have divided loyalties to mum and dad, particularly if they ask us to do conflicting things. And when that happens, and it often does, certainly more often when we have reached adulthood and are expected to make adult decisions, we will have more conflicts of interest that we are supposed to resolve. And having a moral system makes the resolution of these moral dilemmas easier. In fact, the more I think about it, the more it is obvious that secular Quranism is the answer. Otherwise, it is just my opinion against yours, and you saying, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" and I saying the same thing. But I would listen if you were to say that your idea is better than mine and you give valid and sound reasons about why your idea is better than mine. But if you have no solution at all, then it is not rational for you to insist that your lack of a solution is better than my solution. The fact that you don't have a solution means that you are lower in status than me, and the only way you could raise your status against me would be to say that you have a solution that is better than mine, and then you would have to give reasons about why you think it is better than mine, and so on. This is how living in a world operating on truth, logic, and morality would work. So obviously, to make these to have a system of resolution for all these conflicting contests of opinion, we would always have to look to a higher authority than us. And we know that parties to a dispute, they could go to court or they could appoint an arbitrator. And this is a system of dispute resolution that is in fact necessary to a functioning society. For some reason, nationalists find this concept very hard to accept, or perhaps they are pretending not to understand, which is, again, a sign of a degenerate character. It's only the lower orders who pretend not to hear you. You know, the servant or the waiter in the restaurant, you know, whose attention you are trying to attract. And obviously the only way of resolving these different opinions must be some moral hierarchy with God at the top, even if we don't quite believe in him. Because even if we don't believe in God, we can hypothesize about any as even an expression for it, which is, you know, in a perfect world, in the best of all possible worlds, in an ideal scenario, such and such would happen. So it's really very simple. We already have a moral system capable of resolving all our disputes, but we choose not to use it because I think it's because people are just catatonic. I mean, I was going to say neurotic, but really, it's gone beyond that. Today, I had to look at my Facebook notifications, and to my horror, it seemed that people were making even less sense than usual. I'm particularly thinking of a man who said he was baptized and then he converted. No, he had a confirmation ceremony. You know, I always go on about the confirmation ceremony uh, and my repeatedly pointing out that only those who have undergone a confirmation ceremony have the right to call themselves Christian. The rest of us are not. Are only cultural Christians if we wish to identify as Christian at all. And he said first that he was confirmed in 43, and I was interested because obviously um, it is quite a late confirmation if you only get yourself confirmed in later middle age. And my next question was, what made you undergo this confirmation ceremony? And I'm still waiting for a response. And to be fair to him, he said he's a little elderly. He's 82, and he said he had this done in the 90s, or was it, or perhaps he was in his 50s. He wasn't sure, and I wonder if he can actually remember why he chose to undergo this confirmation ceremony. You would have thought that doing such a thing in your life would mean, some conscious decision, some momentous decision, but people don't seem to even remember the occasion or why they did it. I guess I'm saying that if I were to do such a thing, I would immediately be able to recall the reasons why I did so, and unless I, lost my mind or suffering from amnesia or dementia, I would remember something like that. But this isn't the only man who has said something similar. I once asked somebody, an Irish ethno-nationalist, no less, whether he'd been confirmed, and he said he couldn't remember, he wasn't sure, and he had to check with someone, which I thought was extraordinary. So all these Europeans who undergo this confirmation ceremony without understanding the purpose of it all. It's shocking, actually, because, well, we know about, how marriage changes your legal status, and, because the whole point of marriage is that it does affect your legal status. So, one day, the day before your marriage, you're a bachelor or a spinster, and supposing you died and you had a lot of money, and you didn't make a will, and if you died and you didn't make a will and you weren't married, then your worldly goods would go to your next of kin, and it wouldn't be your wife or spouse because you wouldn't have one. But after you marry and you die intestate, then all your worldly goods would go to your spouse. So it has enormous significance on who is supposed to be your next of kin. And this could be compared to, well, should be compared to people who decide to believe in one religion or another. Surely we understand that if we really took our vows seriously, then we would be, well, assuming God exists and has a power to punish and reward us in the afterlife, and has specifically forbidden idolatry, then you should have a care about whether you choose a religion that compels you to practice idolatry and blasphemy, and choosing one that doesn't. So to display such carelessness and indifference suggests a fundamental atheism. And of course, this fundamental atheism is not confined to these confused men who have undergone a confirmation ceremony but can't remember why, or are not sure if they have undergone a confirmation ceremony. But with Jews, they would know. So we can understand that. Well, you would understand if I told you, and I'm telling you, that the confirmation ceremony is a ritual that has been adopted from Judaism, and you will know that in Judaism there is a coming of age ceremony for Jewish boys. It's called the bar mitzvah. And when a boy has his bar mitzvah, he will be told that his sins will be paid for by himself and not attached to the bill of his parents. I don't think you will find many Jews saying, I'm not sure if I had a bar mitzvah or not. Let me check with my parents. Or, I can't remember why I underwent the bar mitzvah at the age of 43. I mean, you just wouldn't hear things like that. And I think this is evidence of how casually the Gentile European takes his religion. It's a formality. If he did it, it was, well, I don't know, probably to get into the priesthood, to marry someone. We don't know. It's a kind of box ticking, not a conscious and serious affair, which suggests that fundamentally people are atheist, and therein lies the problem of not taking anything seriously, not really thinking about the future after death. And this makes everything very hard to fix, really. Because everybody will be claiming to be one thing or the other, but not really believe it. And they will not be adhering to any principle, because that is the whole point of having a religion. I'm not talking about getting into heaven. I'm saying it is a way of judging somebody's behavior and suitability for whatever position you have in mind for this person. Everyone would want to be considered reasonable and honest, as well as decent. And in order to get these credentials established, you would have to be known not to be a liar, to be able to understand logic and occasionally use logic to defend your position or to challenge somebody else's position. And you would have to have certain moral principles that you feel socially, if not morally, obliged to stand by. So telling the truth would just be implicit and assumed. But back to the question of Dennis Prager being considered not a good Jew because he has loyalties to Israel. Well, Jews are a bit different, since they're the only people who have a homeland that, that they can always return to, in theory anyway. Other people don't. I mean, for others, it would depend on, well, what passport they hold or what passports they hold. So, somebody who looks Chinese doesn't necessarily have the right to go and live in China. There will be, formal procedures to be undergone, and they would be the same for non-Chinese people who want to become citizens of China, for example. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there is no sort of special route. I think if you want Chinese citizenship in China, you would have to, point to a few relations, usually a spouse, in order to acquire Chinese citizenship. And I think this procedure is general for the world. But on the question of how we would wish to be identified, I mean, obviously, we all live in countries who wish to enjoy good government in our countries of residence, and the only way to enjoy good government is to ensure that most people in your country understand, will have a good moral education. I don't think Westerners have a good moral education. We all know they are mostly mentally ill, that they are sexually promiscuous, that I don't think they understand the nature and purpose of having moral principles, because they have no functioning religion that they really believe in. And this is why so many of them claim to be Christian, but often they don't have the faintest idea of what a Christian is supposed to believe in. And if they were told, I think they would be angry, because it's even more absurd than what Jews and Muslims are supposed to believe in. And they would have been misled by the church talking about church activity and relevance of the church, and this is measured by people, visitors, bums on pews, and bums on pews are not Christian. They would usually, in Europe, be the bums of tourists from non-Western countries who visit Europe because of its architecture. They would find Europe exotic in the way that many Westerners would find the Far East exotic. And so we come to the question of, what are you going to choose? You're going to will you always follow the orders of your government, under the rule of my country, right or wrong? I wonder what that saying came from. Where it came from? I think it was Roman. See half Galician is in the chat. Let's read it then. So who said that? My country, right or wrong? Carl Schurz. He was an American. Yes, I think my computer's on its last legs. You can probably hear it sighing and groaning. He was a US senator. He used a phrase in one of his famous speeches. He said, my country, right or wrong, if right to be kept right, and if wrong to be set right. So it's not the nihilistic automaton. Okay, I should read it. It's the first time for me. Who was the original creator of this phrase? The story goes back to the early 19th century when a US naval officer and Commodore Stephen Decatur was gaining immense admiration and accolades for his naval expeditions and adventures. Decatur was famous for his daredevil acts of valor, especially for the burning of the frigate USS Philadelphia, which was in the hands of pirates from the Barbary States. Having captured the ship with just a handful of men, Decatur set the ship on fire and came back victorious without losing a single man in his army. British Admiral Horatio Nelson remarked that this expedition was one of the boldest and daring acts of the age. Decatur's exploits continued further in April 1816. After his successful mission of signing of the peace treaty with Algeria, Stephen Decatur was welcomed home as a hero. He was honored at a banquet where he raised his glass for a toast and said, our country, in her intercourse with foreign nations, may she always be in the right. But our country, right or wrong? This toast went on to become one of the most famous lines in history. The sheer patriotism, the blind love for motherland, the egotist zeal of a soldier makes this line a great jingoistic punchline. While this statement has always been contested for its highly narcissistic undertones, you cannot but help the prevailing sense of patriotism that is the hallmark of a great soldier. Edmund Burke, the inspiration behind the phrase. One cannot say for sure, but perhaps Stephen Decatur was greatly influenced by Edmund Burke's writing. In 1790, Edmund Burke had written a book titled Reflections on the Revolution in France, in which he said, to make us love our country ought to be lovely. Now, we need to understand the social conditions prevailing during Edmund Burke's time. At this point in time, the French Revolution was in full swing. The 18th century philosopher believed that along with the fall of the French monarchy, there was also a fall of good manners. People had forgotten how to be polite, kind, and compassionate, which led to depravity during the French Revolution. In this context, he lamented that the country needs to be lovable in order for the people to love their own country. Carl Schurz, the US senator with a gift of the gab. And I've just read you know, what he said, my country right or wrong, if right to be kept right, and if wrong to be set right. So quite inspirational. It's become one of the greatest quotes in American history. In 1901, British author G.K. Chesterton wrote in his book, The Defendant, my country right or wrong is a thing that no patriot would think of saying except in a desperate case. It's like saying, my mother, drunk or sober. He goes on to explain his view. No doubt if a decent man's mother took to drink, he would share her troubles to the last, but to talk as if he would be in a state of gay indifference as to whether his mother took to drink or not is certainly not the language of men who know the great mystery. Chesterton, through the analogy of the drunk mother, was pointing out to the fact that blind patriotism is not patriotism. Jingoism can only bring about the downfall of the nation, just like false pride brings us to a fall. English novelist Patrick O'Brian wrote in his novel Master and Commander, but you know as well as I, patriotism is a word, and one that generally comes to mean either my country right or wrong, which is infamous, or my country is always right, which is imbecile. How to use this famous quote, my country right or wrong. In the world we live today, with growing intolerance and terror breeding in every dark alley, one has to tread carefully before using jingoistic phrases purely for rhetoric. While patriotism is a desirable quality in every respectable citizen, we must not forget that the first duty of every global citizen is to set right what is wrong in our country. If you choose to use this phrase or pepper your speech or talk, use it diligently. Um, I thought diligently meant industriously. Make sure to spark the right kind of patriotic fervor in your audience and help to bring about change in your own country. I'll read the chat now. Quite a few comments, and the usual number at last. Connaught has appeared again. Ralph thought my country right or wrong came from Voltaire. It did not. Ralph, are you saying you want to come on? But well, I don't think it'll be very constructive. You asked me a question already, and I've already answered your question. Did you understand my answer? Yeah, I don't let you on because I don't want a long stream. Gossip about Britney. Ralph thinks he's going to get Richard Spencer to appear on his stream. Yes, Ralph says Christians just don't care that they are guilty of idolatry and blasphemy. And I'm saying, if you really believed in God, then you ought to care that you're offending him with your idolatry and blasphemy. And he can't get around that. Somebody mentioned the Goan Inquisition to me earlier. Spencer, in his discussion with Joel Davis, didn't particularly distinguish himself. He's basically saying, I'm a neoliberal and a neocon, and that's how things are going to be. But Joel Davis at least managed to show off his understanding of geopolitics. I'm glad you mentioned the discussion between Adam Green and E. Michael Jones. I did mention it a few days ago in a few short streams, and I was basically saying that there were, it was kind of a beauty contest of two anti-Semites. So E. Michael Jones was saying, come to Catholicism and be anti-Semitic my way. And Adam Green was saying, all the Abrahamic faiths are Jewish. Made me think of neo-paganism, which is both as stupid as each other. These solutions, it's not going to work. It's not going to work in America. Americans are not going to suddenly start worshipping pre-Christian European deities. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I really think people have gone mad. And of course, Americans are not mostly Catholic. And even if they think they're mostly Christian, but, we know they're not. They don't really believe. And as for Nick Fuentes, I mean, he's not going to get anywhere because he's just a young man. So while he may have the gift of the gab, without support from the establishment, he will get exactly nowhere. And he's not exactly an intellectual. So he won't have the moral and intellectual authority he needs to put his stamp on things. So I mean, he's not even talking to people like Joel Davis and Richard Spencer, is he? So, he'll just be ploughing his own lone furrow and not be gaining any moral and intellectual respectability. So Connaught is saying, I've been mostly monologuing. No, I haven't. I've had conversations with sensible people. I've talked with Number One Lobster. Yesterday I streamed what Well, it was basically an accusation, which I thought was quite compelling. And oh, half Galician, have you heard it? Because I'd really like you to answer it, or if you can't, perhaps pass it on to your rabbi. It was called, part one is the accusations, part two is the defense. You may not have heard of it, but when you do listen, perhaps you'll formulate a kind of defense. Yeah, everybody go to it. So, what is the reason why Jews don't spread the no hike laws? Can we have the official reason from you, half Galician? Yes, Stephen James says that because churches are such pretty buildings, they have been monetized and made to pay for themselves, even if no people actually go to worship there. Yeah, House of Commons said he always platforms George, but George really revealed himself when he was on my channel the other day when he said, he actually said that his grandchildren will sort things out. He actually said that. I have him on record for saying that. So that's how much of a solution he has, which is laughable. So, half Galician, but perhaps you go to part one is the accusations, and produce part two, which is the defense. Yes, I am aware that the reason why Jews wouldn't promote the no-hide laws was because of the fear of violence from Christians who could never win the argument intellectually and always resorted to violence to, quote, win, unquote, the argument. Yes, I know that, and I'm afraid they are being punished for this reluctance to teach properly the no-hide laws, and the evidence of their failure to teach the no-hide laws is three global Christian empires. So, they're guilty as charged and they're being punished. They will be punished. Together with the Muslims who haven't obeyed chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran, probably in their entire Islamic history. So they're going to get it in the neck. I mean, it's extraordinary that I should be warning you, of all people. Connox asks an interesting theological question. He says, isn't it a bit cruel of God to allow a heretical sect to start a new world religion that leads a third of humanity astray? Thank you for that question. That is really a question I was hoping people would ask. If God didn't like Christianity, if he thinks it's idolatry and blasphemy, why did he allow Christianity to succeed to the extent that it acquired three global empires? And that is the question that I have the answer to. Five. British summertime? Okay. So that is the question I will answer. In fact, I have answered it, but you probably didn't pay attention. I might as well give it to you now before I go. And it is this. Why did God allow three global empires to arise, promoting Christianity? And it is because it's such a weak faith that once you have, the communications and transport to establish a global empire of the kind that we have had for 3 centuries, when Christianity collapses, guess what is going to take over? It's just sort of kind of cleared the way for, all the sensible ideas. Okay, so it's God giving Christians a rope to hang themselves with. So, you will let them, think they're riding high and, win their wars and, enjoy their imperial adventures and kill each other, with their European wars of religion, and then the First and Second World War. And now, as we contemplate the possibility of a Third World War, we come to a crossroads of more Christianity or the obviously better religion that is based on the Quran. Which will it be? And I think you will find secular Quranism a very useful lifeboat or life jacket. And you will owe it to yourselves and your descendants, if you're going to have any, to talk about it a bit more. And if you don't have a channel, then you should be posting on the channels of people who do, and ask them why they're not talking about secular Quranism. And you want to know why they can't even talk about it. If my idea is so silly and mad, then they should have me on to demonstrate its madness and silliness. So why don't these alt-right YouTubers have me on? Why do they just keep producing these streams like, ooh, what is Western identity? Ooh, we're not really sure because ooh, we don't like Christianity and we don't like Trump and and all this sort of mincing around videos, never dealing with never asking the right question, let alone giving the right answer. So less of this poncing around, not directing your mind to the real issue that will give you a national identity that you will not be ashamed of having, which is to restore the patriarchy, to have a new religion which will give you the national identity that is as decent and desirable. So, well, why shouldn't I platform Sam? He's such a character. He at least believes in what he is supposed to believe in. Jews are supposed to believe in the arrival of the Messiah. I mean, he knows my views about, I don't expect him to arrive. He's not the maid of all work to answer questions Jews don't want to answer and do stuff that Jews don't want to do. So the latest video by Rabbi David Bar Haim about the Messiah not coming exactly expresses what I wish to express. So even if you're Jewish, and even if you really expect the Messiah to come, he's not going to come just because you want him to come, and you can't be bothered to do the things that you feel that you don't want to do. And Jews have a lot to answer for. They haven't properly believed in their religion for a long time. I've pointed out all the punishments that they are subject to according to their Torah, and their rabbis actually have no answer. I mean, all they're going to say is, "Oh, it doesn't apply now." But it's like, when did God say it no longer applies? He didn't say that at all. I mean, the only way he could be interpreted to say it no longer applies would be to say, well, God made a second better revelation, and that was the Quran, and it's not so restrictive, and it has a more seductive heaven, and we can escape all the horrible death penalties of Judaism if we convert to Islam before we are dead. Because otherwise, if you die as a Jew and you're subject to any of the 36 capital offences, and okay, Gentiles won't punish you for being idolaters, blasphemers, sodomites, adulterers, etc., etc. But one of the most interesting capital offences is the penalty, is the crime of ernigakat, and it means that you are you would be subject to the death penalty for being a citizen of a city that has gone astray. And what the Torah means by a city that has gone astray is that it would be a city that practices idolatry, and since Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy, then any Jew in the West, in Europe anyway, is definitely guilty of it. So any Jew in Christendom who's a citizen of any European nation, he's definitely going to be guilty of it. And if since they won't be punished, then the penalty awaits them in their afterlife. So I hope Harv Galissian understands. I understand that he's American, but there's a kind of question about whether America is a Christian nation or not in the case of United States versus the Church of the Holy Trinity. It's quite a famous case in 1892 when it's basically about whether the Anglican Church was guilty of illegally importing labour when they paid for the passage of a priest, an Anglican priest, to come and preach there. And the locals were saying, yes, obviously, it infringes the Aliens Act or the Alien Labour Act, and then it went to court, and I think I'll look it up for you. I mean, it's still a live issue. And yeah, I think it's helpful. So he's got a heading on whether America is a Christian nation, because it came up, because do we officially have is our religion Christianity or not? And the High Court was saying yes and no. So what will the court say now? I mean, they only said that to get a particular result. So if I explain it to you, it will actually help me. So basically, in 1892, there was a decision in the Supreme Court of the United States regarding an employment contract between the Church of the Holy Trinity, New York, and an English Anglican priest. Contracts to import labour were forbidden by federal law, and specifically by the Alien Contract Labour Law, an act of Congress passed in 1885 prohibiting the importation and migration of foreigners and aliens under contract of agreement to perform labour or service of any kind in the United States, its territories, and the District of Columbia. So even then they were complaining about immigrant labour. Yeah, they were complaining about, other white people. Court decision. The court held that a minister was not a foreign labourer under the statute, even though he was a foreigner. So, an exception was made for Anglican priests and maybe other kinds of priests. And then the question arose as to whether America is a Christian nation. And I should read this for you. So he wrote a book in 1905, just saying, are we a Christian nation or not? So obviously there's doubt, So this is a quote from his book, The United States, a Christian Nation. But in what sense can it be called a Christian nation? Not in the sense that Christianity is the established religion or that people are in any way or in any matter compelled to support it. On the contrary, the Constitution specifically provides that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And, well, he was quoting the First Amendment, boys and girls. Neither is it Christian in the sense that all of its citizens are either in fact or named Christian. On the contrary, all religions have free scope within our borders. Numbers of our people profess other religions and many reject all. Nor is it Christian in the sense that a profession of Christianity is a condition of holding office or otherwise engaging in public service, or essential to recognition either politically or socially. In fact, the government as a legal organization is independent of all religions. Nevertheless, we constantly speak of this republic as a Christian nation, in fact, as the leading Christian nation of the world. This popular use of the term certainly has significance. It is not a mere creation of the imagination. It is not a term of derision, but has substantial basis, one which justifies its use. So does this passage remind you of a certain person called Jay Walker, who is infamous for saying, "Yeah, but no"? Well, it seems that Justice Brewer is a judge that also says, "Yeah, but no." So I hope that more Americans will read George Washington's speech and discuss these matters. I cannot expect rather dim-witted British people who never study these things and are not expected to know anything about this to join me in this discussion. All right, I've spoken for nearly an hour. I won't go over that. Thank you for coming by.